live streamed. Okay. And action. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some. My name is Gregory Sneed, and welcome to the community briefing here in Los Angeles. We bring you events, information, good quality conversation of things that are impacting our community, both here in the Los Angeles area and across the country. My name is Gregory Sneed, and I have my own company, LifeSaver Financial Services, where I help clients keep more of the money that they make. I've spent my entire career helping people and businesses to keep more of their money, and I'm able to do that for you when you reach out. LifeSaver Financial Services, and I will put my information in the chat box. So welcome again. It is now my pleasure to introduce our queen host of the community briefing, Miss Crystal Mitchell.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Glad to have you here. Hello, all my regulars. And we have a fantastic guest, Mr. Michael Anderson. He has this amazing book that's out. And if you live in Los Angeles, you'll really connect to it. I found some information out that I didn't even know. And I've been here for a while and I thought I was a pretty nosy, informative individual. But he informed me. I learned some new things. So you guys will definitely enjoy that. I am Crystal Mitchell. I am the co-director of Recycling Black Dollars and a business coach in the community. I provide workshops and training and coaching for small businesses to help them succeed in their businesses. This briefing, the community briefing, was brought to us because I felt we needed to have be at the table, hear the information from our leaders and stakeholders in our community that are having these conversations that really shape and direct and affect our business community. So I'm glad that you guys are here. This is also a networking platform. Recycling Black Dollars, that's what we do. We bring people together and make sure that we are recycling our dollars. And if we don't know you exist, we can't support you. So glad to have you. My co-hosts, Mr. Greg Sneed and Stephen Turner and Robin Billups, we bring this to you every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. So please share and bring more people. So with that, Stephen, you gonna introduce yourself or are you gonna wait to the end? All righty, so we're gonna turn it back over to Mr. Greg Sneed. As soon as he unmutes.
Yeah, I'm glad actually my screen notifies me, says you're muted. And now it's showtime. So today we welcome Michael Anderson. I'm gonna go in reverse today. So Michael started off at Washington University in St. Louis. And he then migrated over to the Southern California Institute of Architecture. And he specialized in architecture and urban design. And from an education standpoint, he also completed the Ross Minority Program in real estate at University of Southern California. He's been with Base Architect in terms of an architect, community economic development, transit-oriented development, and aviation architecture. He served as an architect, then president, and then chief executive officer of Base Architecture. He is now the president of Anderson Barker Architects, and they deal with accelerated housing and transit, transforming the needs of home ownership for working adults and into a manageable business transaction where family gets a home and income property simultaneously. And as the government, banks are taking equity role in creating affordable home ownership. It's mutually beneficial. But the key thing that he's here today is to talk about, he's got a book, okay? He's an architect, an urban designer, but he also likes seeing kids growing up in poverty to be elevated, to see our elderly who have been deprived, to get them into a safe environment. So for more than 30 years as an architect, he conducted redevelopment studies for Black and Brown communities, only to see them just become a notebook or something on the shelf. So he has created a book, which he's going to share with us today, about information, things that can transform your life. So it is my pleasure today to welcome Michael H. He's going to tell us what the H stands for, Anderson. and he's also from New York City.
You claim all New Yorkers, don't you, Greg?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Actually born in St. Louis. Unfortunately, my parents worked for TWA, and when they divorced in the mid-60s, my father moved to New York. My father was a light-skinned brother that looked Jewish, so they made him deal with the Orthodox Jewish communities, but that's how I spent every summer in New York. It was a great experience. So that was my New York experience for about 12 years of my life. But with that, let me just go ahead, if it's okay. I'll go ahead and go through the book. The book basically was a product out of 21 years of attempting to do development and economic projects in Crenshaw, Compton, and other parts of Los Angeles. And I decided to write a book so that we could have a platform to discuss why things aren't changing in our communities and understand it from a perspective. Because as an architect, I design and build things in other communities that have been very successful, but in our communities, they're very challenged. And so with that, I'll share the screen and go right through this. It'll be about 25 minutes. I'll try to cut it down shorter as well. Can I share the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Let's see what happens. So can you see the screen, Urban Magic? Okay, thank you.
It's coming.
So this is the title of the book. If you notice, this is the Compton Transit Station that I designed, and the property behind the apartment housing. I also entitled that project as a part of this other project. And this is something I did proactive, not getting paid by the city, but I was trying to encourage Compton to do TOD as it's being done in other communities. I'm not a Bible token person, but about 30 years ago, I remember seeing this when someone's mentioned this in the Bible, and I always feel we're all here. Our purpose is to make life better for those now so that we can have a better quality of life going forward. And Black communities are the places in ruined urban areas that need to be repaired. I was telling George about my background going to Harlem Music Festival, but my inspiration came from my great-grandfather, a man born in 1893, took his family through the Depression undepressed. He was selling cans of oil back in the early 20s and so forth. Went on to start the first Black cab company in St. Louis. This is his wife and his kids at the service station during World War II. He wound up having a limousine business that funded all the Black funeral homes in St. Louis, that serviced all the Black funeral homes in St. Louis. And this is me growing up in Laclede Town, a community built in 1963. It was before desegregation. It was a Black and white community, had jazz and everything. It was a great place to live until Pruitt-Igoe was destroyed, and they moved all the low-income people from Pruitt-Igoe into it. But on the right, you'll see this was Cook Avenue. This was where my great-grandfather built a 4-family house where all of us lived in, and we owned it. And the beautiful thing is it helped inspire a product that I'm going to talk about at the end of the presentation that I want to build for Black and brown families specifically. But watching the Cook Avenue die is one of the things that inspired me to figure out how do we change our communities. And this is a picture of me and my godfather, Charles Fleming. He was an architect. Charles and his partner, Kerry Jenkins, were the architects of the Martin Luther King Hospital in Watts. But Charles, my godfather, bought 200 acres in West County, St. Louis, and built an entire community for upper income Black and white people that became a wealthy community. And seeing him do that and change buildings inspired me to want to be an architect to figure out how to make buildings bring value to our communities. And so to give you a little bit of my background, I've worked on projects in Crenshaw since 1983. The first project I did, you see this little red awning and a couple of these Band-Aids, or what I call them, were put up under the CRA project. But Crenshaw, even back then, has never transformed to the vibrancy we see in other communities. And today, it still pretty much looks the same. In 2010, 2012, I did the Metro TOD study, and this was a vision for the Tavis Smiley site that's now going to be the destination, well, just next to it, the Destination Crenshaw site. But it was to bring vibrancy to the Leimert Park community in a way that it hasn't happened. The book is a 3-part book, and it's broken down. Part 1 is the challenge of change that talks about my journey of trying to develop projects in the Crenshaw community. My inspiration came from 3rd Street Promenade. Every time I would visit 3rd Street Promenade when it first opened in 1989, and by the way, I was involved in early economic studies for 3rd Street Promenade in 1985 through 87. And so when I would always work on these projects, I always dreamed of bringing that vibrancy, that solution to the Crenshaw community. And to me, this could have been Degnan Avenue. So I created a concept to remodel Lamert Park. I lobbied Mayor Bradley for $600,000 in January of 1992. And he said, Michael, we have no money. And then fortunately, not unfortunately, the riots happened. And then they called me back and said, we got the money, move forward with your project. I moved forward with the project. You can see this was the design. It was to make it work in the urban context it did, only to go forward and go to the Cultural Affairs Department and have a brother from the community representing South Central LA Task Force tell the Cultural Affairs Department they should wait for the community to come up with its own plan. The disappointing thing was not only did I lose the capital, but the other purpose of this project was for children to be involved in the planting of the trees and landscaping, where they could take ownership of the project and earn money. But this is the park today in 2021 with a gate and a lock around it. It's only opened by the city. But that was my first knockdown. So my second get up was after the riots, you heard a lot of people talking about economic development. But one thing I never heard was people say what type of jobs you're going to bring to Crenshaw and how you were going to make that happen. That takes buildings with certain types of users. So I came up with the Crenshaw Economic Development proposal, and it was to locate about 6,000 county and federal and state employees to the Crenshaw community, because in the 1990s, they were all in buildings filled with asbestos and lead paint. And there was a major program to relocate those facilities, and that has been done. But my objective was to bring $300 million in salaries to the Crenshaw community, and also to build parking structures like you see here in this diagram to the right with retail shops, because parking was the #1 problem preventing restaurants from opening up in Crenshaw, because whenever you had to get a restaurant permit, you had to show you had parking. But my ultimate goal was to create a vibrancy that brought a younger generation back. And the project was to start with Lamert Park, re-landscape Crenshaw Boulevard down to Rodeo, and then build a series of office buildings. So in lobbying this plan, I went to Senator Ted Kennedy's office for the Crenshaw Economic Development proposal, and he gave me my first letter of support. And while I was there, Linda Griego, who worked for Rebuild LA, I called her and asked her, who else can I go meet? And she opened the door to Senator Boxer, Senator Feinstein, and then I was in Ron Brown's office, and all of them started writing letters of support for the Crenshaw Economic Development proposal. Then I got the opportunity to build an office building, because the military building that was destroyed at La Brea and Rodeo, that lease came up, and it's behind the Albertson stores, now a U-Haul storage facility. But at the time, the developer had a military processing center in the building, which is a medical processing center. And I wanted to put it behind the Crenshaw Mall right here as a new office building to represent the prototype of what could go on Crenshaw Boulevard. I secured $12.5 million in funding for the project, only to come up to CRA's board of directors meeting and have the project shut down and be told I couldn't present it. You can read the book and find out the details about why that happened. But the disappointing thing for me was it stopped Crenshaw from getting an office building and starting to build the Crenshaw Economic Development proposal. And for what I learned from, what I learned from this was that there's a level of competition for some reason amongst ourselves to be sort of the first to do something. And I couldn't understand it, because in the end, all these projects came from what the community was asking for. And all I was trying to do was help people realize what they are asking for. But in addition to this project, I had another landscape project for Crenshaw, which was called 100 Palm Trees for Crenshaw Boulevard. That was to be new sidewalks and new trees from Lamert Park Plaza all the way down to Rodeo. And the purpose was to take out all the sidewalks, all the existing trees, and build new sidewalks wide like this, all the way down the Rodeo, and have a 10-foot light that light up the sidewalk as well as lit the palm trees. And the purpose was to make Crenshaw a beautiful walking, safe corridor. Corridors are important to the revitalization of a community because they give you a perception of safety and vibrancy. I secured $1.5 million for the project, only to be told that I could only get the contract if I teamed with a nonprofit. That didn't happen. So instead, the city spent $1.5 million putting a Band-Aid project in the community. And one of the things I learned is our cities don't learn how to continue to get funding for projects. West Hollywood built Santa Monica Boulevard for $15 million in the first phase, and they put $25 million into over the project over the last 40 years. That same thing needs to happen for Crenshaw as well as other Black communities. The other thing that was disappointing was during the riots, Papa Bush appointed $5.2 billion in transportation funds for riot affected areas. Crenshaw didn't get any part of that funding. But what happened instead was they finished the 110 freeway and the 105 freeway because it had to put funding into communities damaged by the riots. But what I was allowed to build was the Leimert Park homes. And that's when I understood that leadership understands affordable housing, but does not understand the chemistry of economic development. Economic development is not just housing, it's office buildings, it's parking structures, it's streetscape projects, things that add up and create a better value that drive more private investments into the community. These homes sold for $154,000. I negotiated $54,000 in equity to the family members. Thus, their mortgage was about $800 a month. Now the houses are worth about $650,000. And so finally, after getting beat up all the time in Crenshaw, I decided I would go to Inglewood. I kind of felt like Joe Frazier getting beat up by Muhammad Ali, but the truth was it was probably the opposite. Muhammad Ali getting beat by Joe Frazier. I wanted to look like the pretty guy. But in Century Boulevard, I started this project in 1999 and secured $8 million in funding. And this is before Mayor Butts got in office to revitalize this street. This is what was supposed to happen in Crenshaw as well, only to have the director of public works assign the contract to the largest architectural engineering company in the world. Now, the city of Inglewood couldn't complete the federal application for the $3 million in engineering. So they finally reached out after 3 years and asked me, would I do it? I said, sure, I'll do it, but make sure I get the contract for the engineering. I secured the funding from the federal funds in 3 years. And that's when I understood infrastructure. If your staff doesn't know how to find funding, your city's not going to be successful in economic development. So let's talk about why things rarely change. And some of it I've already mentioned. But in 2006, CRA hired me. This is funny, I got to go back to where I got beat up, to redo a study for what could be on the Leimert Park parking lots behind the Vision Theater and transform the parking lots here at Crenshaw and 43rd. And so we came up with a concept of putting mixed use housing on top of parking structures, creating these plazas, making it walkable coming in from Crenshaw Boulevard. And then all of a sudden a protest came out, said, save Leimert. Everybody protested and this project was shut down, only to be approved finally in 2008, which then the real estate crisis happened, right? So again, I kept seeing our communities lose opportunities to make tangible projects happen. The reality is this turns off Black and brown people who want to invest in the community. If you know the story about Magic Johnson trying to develop the mall in our community, Santa Barbara Plaza, this is what turns off Black billionaires and investors to come into their own communities that they would like to invest into. It just doesn't happen. So Compton hired me to design a transit station, and I'm going to share that with you. This was the vision of what it was to be. Letters with beautiful bamboo plants behind it to make a modern TOD. And our cities sometimes settle for mediocrity. So we built the transit station, we built the plaza, and in these huge planter boxes, they did not want the bamboo plants. They said we wanted to feel open. The bamboo may create safety problems. But I realized somebody felt the bamboo would block the vision of the whole place, thus taking away the key element of landscaping. And this is when I started to notice we tend to settle for things less quality than we deserve. But at the same time, I was the architect of this community center you see in Compton. And as I said, I entitled the adjacent property to build senior housing. The purpose was to give Compton a modern transit-oriented development center that where everybody passes on a train every day, they would know Compton was having the investments that others will want to come invest into, like you see in Inglewood today. For some reason, the city just settled on being satisfied with these 3 projects. But at the time, I knew the federal courthouse in downtown LA was not going forward. And I was trying to lobby the city of Compton to ask for a federal courthouse and move their new civic center over to, over to this parcel here, property owned by Danny Bakewell, and make a new civic center. And then we would transform the old civic center, which is state-owned property plus the county, into new housing around it. Because by doing that, you would make jobs and start to have investments come into Compton to raise its quality of life. The beautiful thing about it is if you lived in Compton, you don't have to take one train to go to work in downtown LA or Long Beach. You don't have to connect the trains and everything. That's a major asset. But that didn't happen. The city settled on just the transit station and the senior housing. And then the courthouse went to downtown Long Beach, which you can see how it's fueled vibrancy and investments in downtown. But here's the story of a success you will see in the book. It's the city of Inglewood. And it points out how Mayor Butts came in 2012 or late 2011. A $2 billion project was on hold at Hollywood Park. And this was the same time I was lobbying Century Boulevard for the 9 years before. Once he started moving Hollywood Park forward, Stan Kroenke decided to move the football team, the LA Rams, from St. Louis, which I know why, because I'm from St. Louis. And you got a $5 billion stadium in combination with an existing $2 billion project. I happen to be the architect working on the theaters. I'm sorry. Oops, my bad. Too many buttons. I happen to be the architect working on this for construction management. But all these parking lots you see around, Jesus Christ. All these parking lots you see around here, those are going to be housing units in the future, thus increasing the average household and income to Inglewood. But also Inglewood earns 10% sales tax on all sporting events and entertainment. It's going to become a cash cow. I happen to be the architect also on the Clippers project across the street. I'm designing the plaza buildings, the parking structures and everything. So to me, this is an example of what successful leadership can make happen in our communities. 10 billion in investments in less than 9 years. That's effective economic development with tangible results. So, and this is the housing that would be built in it as well. A lot of existing Black and brown families that own homes are going to benefit from the increased value. Some of them know, I think homes are now $450 to $500 a square foot. But, and then you can see how Century Boulevard has been improved going down to the football stadium. But my key concern that I point out in the book is, what do the children see in our communities when they have not seen economic development? Again, in 2021, Crenshaw looks the same on the west side of the street, south side of the street. But I want to tell you a short story about a boy named Rodale that used to help me clean the alleys when I built the Lemert Park homes. Rodale and his friends, I felt, vandalized the units one time. And then I started paying him to help me clean the alley. And in my conversation, I started asking him about his report card. Rodale was like, "You're not my daddy. I ain't got to tell you what my grades are." I was like, "I ain't got to pay you $5 to help you clean up the alley." And this is in 1997. The amazing thing is, by the end of that semester, he brought me his report card. The 1s and 2s had become 3s and 4s with the teacher's notes saying she does not know what happened, but he is now her teacher's assistant. And that to me is the power behind, if we transform our communities where kids see a better life in their community that they see on TV, we can inspire them and inspire them to become greater self-sustaining adults, just like Rodale became a better student. I never found out what happened to him. I did meet with one of the homeowners that was a social worker, and she said he actually sort of successful and has moved outside Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, and went on to college and things of other things. But I look forward to hearing from him one day. But let's talk about changes that work that lead up to a solution we are currently working on. And so we wanted to find out, how can we make tangible products and investments happen in Black and brown communities? And I call it equity housing. You hear a lot of conversation about bringing equity into Black and brown communities. Well, equity to me translates to money that can grow for a family. And you do this by first creating a vision for what the better community can be. You develop a practical plan, but the key thing is start obtaining funding and continue to get funding, because money follows money. But then start building these projects as soon as possible, include children as we go forward. And to give you an example of the success of TOD development is Culver City around National and Venice Boulevard right now has over $1 billion of projects that is making the new lifestyles of Los Angeles County. This same vibrancy can be happening in Los Angeles. The headquarters of Apple and HBO are moving there. That creates a whole new vibe of young people working in a community that's vibrant. Crenshaw can have the same thing. And so with that, I'm going to dwell right into the final product, which is creating accelerated equity home ownership and transit development in our communities. And it's a way of increasing home ownership for Black and brown families specifically in our communities, and doing it in a way that goes around Prop 209 barriers. Again, this is Leimert Park Homes, but this is a fact. We need 544,000 units of housing today. When I built the Leimert Park Homes, we only needed 180,000. So it shows that we're not making progress. But Black and brown people cannot buy in our own communities. So I wanted to come up with a solution of how can we make ownership possible with a low down payment, but use Black and brown people as the new gentrification to raise the average household income and make a deal large enough to attract banks. That product is building a fourplex that gives a person or family a home plus 3 income units. And we're lobbying that each family would get about 500,000 in equity from federal subsidy on the back end financing that allows a person to put down as little as $35,000 to $50,000. This builds generational wealth because a person has a home plus income property. As your kids grow and you want to put them into college, you're not borrowing out of your house and have to pay it back. You're borrowing from your income units that generate revenue that typically have a little increase on an annual basis. But this will be the owner's unit in the middle. It has 2 stories. It's an outdoor balcony. It's 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. The front unit is a 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath as well. And these back 2 units are 1 bedroom units stacked on top of each other. But they're not like apartments. They basically have 200 square feet of outdoor space for each unit, as you can see here in this balcony area. I don't know where my arrow went. But it's to make it like a courtyard housing that was built in California and Los Angeles in the early 1920s. The other model unit gets equity to an existing single family homeowner who wants to add 3 ADU units and build a 3 bedroom and 2 1 bedroom units and remodel their house to be environmentally friendly. That family would get about $100,000 to $200,000 in equity, and we're targeting 50,000 families around 18 transit stations, specifically in Black and brown communities. This has a benefit of aiding in anti-displacement because the kids can now live on the same lot with mom or aunt and uncle. If you get off work at 5 o'clock, you can have your parents or your aunts and uncles pick the kids up if there's an issue. You can also rent these 1 bedrooms at a lower rate that keeps family and friends in the community. So you're really replenishing the community's culture in a strategic way that aids in offsetting anti-displacement. Because we have to not just talk about concepts, we have to implement the products that starts building the community. And the purpose of the strategy is to lobby the federal government for funding under the Biden administration's goals of wanting to reduce racial inequities. And so we're taking the existing metro studies, we're using private capital to assemble land. These are scattered sites, so it's really easy to do that. And then putting out RFPs for developers to build it. And then the families that would get the 500,000 to 100,000 in equity would go through a CDFI so that they also learn about how to be aware of predator lenders that may come in and try to take part of the assets, which has happened historically in Black and brown communities. But the larger purpose is to bring a younger generation into our communities that create a new vibe for our communities and to grow it. This is a quick map of the areas we're targeting. This is my history with doing studies for Metro about Black and brown communities becoming vibrant. Crenshaw still hasn't reached the vision that it could have reached, like Culver City, because of fear of change and other factors. But most importantly, it's difficult to bring investments into our communities. And so the purpose of this project is to do it in a way that increases home ownership and increases the viability of other projects to be successful. And I'll give you an example. This is the Slaton and Long Beach Avenue station. This is the blue line. This is where the Metro line is going to come above it. If we replace these storage yards and things with fourplexes, this one block represents $64 million in investments, of safe investment. That's how we created added value. This is a county-owned lot that's transformed into a technology center with housing in the front. The orange represents ADU units that were built for existing single-family homeowners. So you start to see how you create a layered value into the community in a way that's successful near transit. Because LA is going to continue to grow because it's so successful as the GDP, #1 GDP producer in the United States as a county. And because of that, we're going to get more crowded and people want to live near transit. So we want to make Black and brown communities that have transit stations valuable. Here's the deal. It's to ask the federal government for $30 billion. I'm working on that now. I'll share that with you. It comes from 3 purses: Treasury, Housing, and Department of Commerce. Basically, you're asking for $2 billion a year. Congress, when they allocate these type of funds, is a 5 to 7 year pitch. But we're also asking for Metro to get $5 billion to build the West Santa Ana Branch Transit Corridor. And this is the return on investment. You get 300,000 new homes, you get 100,000 equity owners, but LA County from the property taxes will earn $2 billion a year in new property tax revenue. And if you make what's called the incremental tax finance district, that money, a majority can stay in that community to make continuous investments for street improvements and infrastructure. But this is the capital stack. This is what gets banks' attention. They said, and we've already met with the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank, if the government puts up 30 billion, it's easy for us to participate because you're making a 65-35 debt ratio for people, not an 80-20 deal or a 90-10. And so we're taking advantage of the Biden administration's goal of seeking a racial inequity solution. And we want to pitch it as Los Angeles has a shovel-ready approach to how to address this racial inequity by increasing home ownership specifically for Black and brown people. We target communities that Black businesses and banks have redlined, or the government, I should say, has redlined. They created this problem, so we're saying they should solve the problem. So this is my history of making progress of it. As I said, we're going to call this Accelerated Equity in Housing and Transit for Black and brown communities, and we're going to lobby it as Los Angeles COVID economic recovery. That way it ties to a larger political purpose. But this is my history in the evolution of building consensus for the project all the way down. And last week, I just presented it to LA Reach, which is an entity of banks and civic leaders. And it was interesting to hear the chairman of the California Bankers Association say, this is well thought out and very doable. And today I'll be meeting again with Wells Fargo Bank in terms of trying to get a letter of support for this project so I can start lobbying the federal officials. What I have done is connected the county supervisors, Solis, Hahn, and Mitchell, office to the federal representatives, Congresswoman Bass, Barragan, Roybal, Allard, and Maxine Waters. Maxine's already talked to me personally about this project. The purpose is to build a consensus where our county representatives are asking the federal representatives directly for a specific solution to go into the White House. And our objective is to get it to Cecilia Rouse. She's chair of the economic advisors in the White House. And then there's a young lady named Joelle Gamble from Riverside that's also a special advisor in the White House. And I was fortunate that my sister was a special advisor to Obama for 4 years. She's been on the Capitol for 40 years and she's retired now. That is also aiding me in making the connections and communicating this as a pilot project. This is something that gets people reelected. We're trying to get the letter to the White House by December or January. We've already met with all the staff of all the federal officials. They're interested in the next steps. And so Supervisor Mitchell's working on a letter of support from the County Board of Supervisors. And I already have my first investment partners letter of interest as well. So with that, I'll stop. But the key action item I'm asking for, if you would like, is to let the supervisors know that you support accelerated transit-oriented development for Black and brown communities. These are the specific people to support. You see at the bottom, county supervisors and the federal representatives as well. But by doing that, we start creating a choir that says, we have a plan for our communities, we believe in it, and we have an action item, so let's get to work. And with that, I will stop. Did I make my time? Okay, thank you.
Awesome, fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know about you guys, but I was highly impressed when I'm reading the book now, and I was highly impressed when I met Michael and I had a long conversation with him. Just awesome, Michael. And whatever we can do, we will certainly do that, or I definitely will certainly do that, and Recycling Black Dollars will certainly do that. I think being able to create equity ownership in our community is definitely the route to closing in our wealth gap. Apartments are fantastic, but they don't do us as a people any good. They do the developers and whoever built it. They make them wealthier, but it doesn't help our communities at all. So there's a couple of questions. Greg, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Actually, Stephen had one here. With the demise of CRA, what programs and/or initiatives can our politicians and officers take to encourage community redevelopment?
So that's a major challenge we have. And actually, so I'm pitching this project as a pilot project where a public-private partnership the majority owner of the entity has to be a nonprofit. That way the county can do a deal directly, unsolicited. And that's the first step that I'm taking to use this project as a pilot project for how we can approach redevelopment of our communities. We use all private capital because the county and government officials can't make programs specifically for Black and brown people or contracts. We have to do it by using private capital and then using federal funds on the back end. And the purpose is we've assembled a teams of architects, developers, and property entitlements that have done all this before. I'm approaching it the same way as Law was approaching its modernization of the airport, using private capital, design, build teams to build a solution. We need the products fast, not a drawn out program. The key thing is bring on housing rapidly. And by us acquiring the land and entitling it, we take the risk out of the developers' concern of will they build their project. And we're going to create a level of competitions where cities and communities want to compete for the federal equity funds, so they will start approving these projects faster so we can get them absorbed by Black and brown people faster. That will revitalize the community. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And by the way, for those who are attending, if you do have a question, please put it in the chat box. Let's see. Okay, here's one that I put in there. Does your book identify those key politicians that were helpful in driving economic development in South LA?
It does.
And conversely, does it identify those who could have done more, but for some reason it just didn't happen?
I couldn't say their names. You will get the drift. So all you gotta do is figure out the timing.
Yeah, there you go. How will the California bills AB 9 and 10 impact this type of development?
Well, that's the benefit. I'm pushing it to make it work. So we have these bills that have just been passed, but my concern is you really don't know how they work until you can push the process, all right? Because once we start building it in terms of expediting entitlements and things, until we have the products in this in the strategies happen, if we're talking about the entitlement bills, am I correct about that? Right. So the entitlement components, that, as I said, we make a policy, but we really don't know how it works until we implement the projects. That's when, as architects and builders, we find out will it work. It should help. And because we're building fourplexes, which are not multifamily, it should make that happen faster. Now, around the transit stations, we're doing more development. It's not just housing, it's mixed use development, because the other part is to create jobs in the community. So that would be commercial buildings. So we're going to push that envelope to see how it works and if it doesn't.
On those fourplexes, what size lot can accommodate that? I mean, is it a standard lot? Is there zoning changes that have to happen to make that, to put that in place?
Some communities may have zoning changes because some communities have like overlay plans and some of them don't have overlay plans where they have an outdated community plan. We're actually working on one project in a certain part of LA County that has a community plan that we can only go up to 3 units. But then after we build the 3 units, we can make an accessory dwelling units. It's like, okay, that's crazy. So we're going to try to figure out how to make that happen. So that sometimes interferes with, you can't go by right. But again, we're going to start pushing this so that we can have a conversation about how to fine tune it. I think once we secure the federal equity, cities and governments will adjust quickly so that they can get home ownership in their jurisdictions to make things happen. If you get politicians banging on the door of county departments and city LADBS, all of a sudden the whole posture changes. And that's the other purpose we're going to do.
Thank you. Emily has a question. Are you including housing for homeless or people with mental illness or people with disabilities?
I'm not under this. This is strictly an absorption for home ownership to increase the average household income to grow our local market economies. There are enough nonprofit organizations building housing for homeless, transitional housing that can focus on that. And I'm not ignoring it. And what I mean by that is part of our plan is to assemble enough land around transit stations within a mile, mile and a half radius, where as we assemble the land, I can set us, not I, the county, the entity, the government can set aside a portion of that land for affordable housing developers to build the component that she's asking for. And that way, their nonprofits aren't competing for the same market rate property. It is actually ground leased and made something that helps them bring down the cost of affordable housing. Affordable housing is $750,000 a unit. Is ridiculous. That's not affordable, right? I mean, that's a single family house in some neighborhoods.
All right, next question is, the state mandated housing element is being revised. Excuse me. Have you thought about offering your home ownership strategy to SCAG?
Oh, SCAG. I was like,
SCAG.
who's that SCAG? Southern California Association of Government. I have not gone down that road of conversation with SCAG. I think being on a program such as yourself, and that was the other purpose of the book, was to start putting out a conversation that creates a platform to talk about more tangible solutions. I hope they hear about this. Right now, my focus is to develop in at least 3 locations what I want to call proof of concept, so that we can get it going. I basically consider this like we're trying to make the Tesla of community modernization. So let's get the first versions of the Teslas in the communities and let people start buying them and living them. The other beautiful things about these houses is that they have solar panels, they have batteries, they actually have Tesla batteries if we may choose to go with that, where the house's air conditioning system runs off the battery and the solar power, thus reducing its impact on the environment, but most importantly, lowering your cost of operating a house. So the way that you can save a family money in one way, reducing their need for a car, that makes a better quality of life. It can save you as much as $20,000, $25,000 a year in living expenses.
How are the, we have a couple more questions. Colette, Crystal? Oh,
Yeah, there was one question. Michael, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yes. Okay. Michael, can you speak on, and I think I lost you. What happened? Okay. Speak on why it's so important to increase the income values in our community when it focuses on bringing in outside businesses or like Trader Joe's and organizations like that to enhance our community. I thought that was very valuable.
Oh, sure. So the larger purpose is to use Black and brown people to increase the average household incomes in our communities. The average household income communities in Black and brown communities sit around $45,000, maybe $50,000 a year, but that has a large low income impaction as well. And organizations like Trader Joe's and them want to move into communities where they see $75,000, $80,000 in average household incomes. And so it's basically simple, which is perfect for the Compton. So like, let's say you have 12,000 units of housing, the average household income is $40,000. Well, if you build 12,000 units of housing at $80,000 on an average household income, now you've kind of graduated it up. Well, let me say 100,000. Now you kind of graduated up the average household income that starts to drive investment. That also helps existing businesses get more sales and also helps them qualify for business loans. A bank's not going to loan a business in a community to remodel their facility and to make all these improvements and buy all this stock and inventory if they look at the bottom line of how many building permits have been pulled last year, what are the value of those permits, how much is the household income it's going to generate. That's the math of what I call the economic chemistry that attracts banks to want to go into a community. And that's the larger purpose of the federal ask, is to see the increase of how we build average household incomes in a way that replenishes the culture of the community with younger Black and brown people, create a vibrancy because they're going to bring their lifestyles to the community as well. So it's going to be a whole new vibe. You see young Black children on Fairfax and La Brea, all other parts of LA, but not in their own communities at these vibrant places. It will do all that simultaneously. And also it adds value because as the value goes up, your properties increase in value. And a bank will loan money to a place where they see a house is now worth $2 million versus it'd be worth $500,000 and somebody wants to make $250,000 worth of improvements. Does that answer your question, Crystal?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much. I think that's the additive to that makes it really doable and people to really buy into that, because we're all, if you're landowners or homeowners, you want to see your communities the value increase, but we don't want to have to drive 35 miles out to go to good stores because we don't have a supermarket in our own in our own neighborhood because they
Right.
no longer think it's valuable. So I think that's a really good approach. And I think there's a question here on, even beyond writing to our supervisors, how else can we help get the message out and help you make this happen? Because I think this would be incredible for the Black and brown communities.
I think Key just let all the county officials know, especially Solis, especially Holly Mitchell. She's taken action, especially Han, all of them. Let them all know that you support the accelerated equity housing for Black and brown communities. And then you can write letters also, if you want, emails. That way we can then start having, we can start getting letters of support so that we can implement our officials to take actions on this approach.
I just had a quick question, Michael Anderson. How you doing, man?
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. That was awesome. Are you contemplating, and sorry if I missed this, I was off for a second. Are you contemplating any private equity money in this type of deal? And if so, kind of at what scale?
If we use private capital, it's going to be somehow involved in the business transaction that then gets folded into an equity role. But if you bring in private capital, in the end, the private investor has to get their money back.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you have to figure out what that formula is going to be in terms of how you're going to use private capital. To me, the private capital is going to serve as equity, either in the form of land value going into the product of the houses. But that'll all be figured out on our financial performance. In the end, all the private capital basically makes a bankable deal that then gives equity to the first-time buyer that reduces the cost of owning a house and makes a deal feasible to a bank to make that type of investment. We do want the recipients of the federal equity to do their loans through Broadway Bank, City First Broadway Bank. And we want to try to lobby for the large banks to fund their loan through Broadway Bank, where Broadway Bank can earn 1% interest on their money and thus grow Broadway Bank's banking ability in the LA County market. I don't want them just to make money on fees. I want them to make money on the long-term interest for making a deal in the Black and brown community that's created by Black and brown people, so that a Black bank can benefit and earn $900 million to $1 billion a year, and let the large banks, they'll make a couple of billion more, but this helps a Black bank become more effective. The other larger purpose is for us to replicate this approach in the 22 urban areas that are pretty much Black and brown urban areas that have a need for how do we correct that quality of life and to get kids out of poverty, because poverty fuels our pipeline to prisons. The quality of environment damaged their ability to aspire to be anything. And that's the larger purpose. So it's not only a business transaction, so it's a social profit. It's a way of, it's the Singapore model. That's the easiest way to say it. If you saw the movie Crazy Rich Asians, Singapore was slums in the 60s, and they focused on home ownership. 90% of the people in Singapore own a home. As a result, they have generational wealth. And Crazy Rich Asians shows how you can be crazy Black Americans if we had majority ownership in our communities, and we know every Negro wants that. So, I'll stop there.
Right.
Well, no,
It's a challenge to make housing more affordable by trying to cut costs versus increasing the affordability by having increased wealth, increased income, and revitalizing the economy. At this stage, we need to conclude our presentation. Michael, we thank you for your presentation. Tremendous information.
I thank you very much.
We applaud the works that you're doing. We encourage you, and we honor you, and we thank you, and definitely put some information in the chat box about your book.
You want me to do that?
I want you to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys can purchase that book at the Amazon. Let's help make Michael make him a bestseller, because I think it's an awesome book. So go over there and buy the book, but more importantly, leave a review. Reviews are very important on the Amazon platforms. So make sure you do that, but it's definitely a great book. If any of you are part of book clubs, I think this would be a great book club book to be reviewed. Michael, you should even consider Clubhouse, going on Clubhouse, about Clubhouse.
You told me about that. I think I did
Yeah,
join.
I have to.
I would say,
So yeah, utilizing that to have a platform, you can have a great conversation over there.
well, LeVar Burton's
and-
having his next kickoff of what book did you read? So he's a major book fan. If anybody wants to tell LeVar, it's self-serving. If I said, yeah, I read this book.
We'll make that happen. My partner is crazy about your book, so I'm gonna have her become the campaign person for you for getting your book read.
Thank you all so much for this.
So thank you so much. We have Emma Maxey. You want to share something with us? And please, everyone, thank you so much, Michael. That was awesome. Well thought out. Finally, speaking to someone that with an action plan, a doable action plan, and that you're making it happen. You're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk as well. So thank you so much for that. Miss Emma. Take yourself off mute.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry you couldn't hear me. Thank you guys for inviting me again and being here. I missed you for the last 3 weeks, and I've been working on the Community Navigator grant program. So if any of you applied, we will be notifying people that have earned the grants. And real quick, one of the things I want to mention to you that this just happened as of September the 8th. If you have an EIDL loan, there have been some major changes to the program. And one is to increase the maximum loan from $500,000 to $2 million. The second is additional, are going to allow additional monies permitted use from the funds to do whatever you want. Additional ways for the application, they are going to allow certain NAICS codes to meet the program needs and standard size of the program. And this is actually new, and this will go on until the end of the year. They have new affiliation rules, and the new limit, $10 million on total loans to a single corporate group. So this is interesting because, as we know, there are a lot of people that are struggling trying to get a response on their EIDL loans, and they haven't heard. They are working to try to notify everyone in the next couple of weeks to either say you will be getting the funding, or if there's a problem, they have to now tell you, but not say that your loan was denied because of a situation that they didn't put in your remarks as to why. So they're trying to improve all the information. Again, if your limit was 500,000, it has now gone up to $2 million. And take advantage of this 3.7.8 interest rate and 30-year, deferred a year. So this is a way that you can get additional money to support your business, and you're not limited as to what you use that money for. It was the past. So I'm asking anyone that are having problems, take advantage of what's going on. All of this information is on the SBA website. And if you have any questions, always reach out to me at the SBA for any training opportunities or anything you may have. And thank you, Crystal, for having me. And I tell everybody about your program. This is amazing, amazing program. I wish more people would take the time, just an hour every Thursday, and come in. You have some fantastic people speaking, and I'm always impressed. You guys are amazing. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
When you said breaking news, I was thinking maybe portion of the EIDL was going to be forgivable now. Right?
No, you know what? That's interesting you asked that question. That has never happened that they've forgiven the EIDL. We're still working on the PPPs, but the EIDL, unless something major happens, don't bet on that. Please.
One can wish and hope and pray, but I do know this. I have a client that I'm working with. She's been actually getting phone calls from the SBA or whoever's processing the EIDL and interacting with them. So all week long, and she's been calling me to keep me updated on what's going on as I'm helping her assist her completing some of the forms. So that we do see that there's a change.
There is a change, and
That there's some interaction and you actually can speak to people.
absolutely. And they're calling people, asking you, do you want to increase your loan? Do you want to increase your loan? People think it's a gag. It is true. If you've done everything and you want to increase it, take advantage of it.
Yeah, I will vouch for that. She's been actually getting phone calls, not just emails, but actually phone calls from human beings. So we want to thank you all. Stephen, you want to close us out? And wait, there was one question real quick. Who would invest money into the Anderson strategy? It could possibly help to demonstrate small investor support. So I guess that's a conversation that we can have with Michael. I think he did talk something about what was going to be the return. So I guess that would have to be a conversation, Michael.
Well, with the minute that we have, I'd like to give Michael Banner the opportunity to elaborate on that very quickly, Michael.
Well, if we don't believe in it, why should somebody else, would be the question I would ask. So if you are reminded of the kinds of things that Michael says he wants to do and put together a team to do it, when you can demonstrate financial support from a wide constituency, it makes people have to take a look at, well, why are these people who live in the community doing it? Other than, a letter of support's fine, those kind of things. And addressing the political apparatus. But the folks who are going to be the biggest beneficiary of this, if it works, will be the people who live in those communities. So, if they've got skin in the game, I think it sends a different message.
It's very correct. Thank you.
I am in agreement with you, Michael. I definitely would invest in it. And I have some friends that probably would too as well. So maybe that's a conversation we can have with Michael Anderson.
And
Great
I'll
idea.
have Michael Banner as my advisor.
Okay, all right.
And Michael bought 10 books.
It's all about teamwork. All about teamwork. So
Well, I mean, I will tell you all that
Michael's right.
I
If we don't believe in it,
invested in Crenshaw. I've invested, I don't know, $50-60 million. So
Yeah.
I'm living proof that it could work.
Right.
I haven't missed any meals by
We like it,
betting
Michael.
on Crenshaw.
Thank you.
And Crystal, we got some late information from Colette, so I put it in the chat on round 9 for the California grants.
Thank you, Greg.
okay.
I'd like
And
to
we
thank
have,
everyone
so next
also
week,
for
guys,
today
we
for
have
logging.
Marcello.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, I'd like to thank everyone.
Go ahead,
for logging in
Stephen, you're going to
today.
announce who's going to be on next week?
I'd like to thank everyone for logging in today on the community briefing. My name is Stephen Turner. I'm the managing principal of the Slaton Group. We're a risk management insurance firm specialized in workers' comp and general liability. More important than that, I'm also a representative of the Black Business Association, 51 years in existence. Next week, in building upon the inertia of Michael Anderson's presentation, we're going to talk about commercial real estate investment. We know about residential, but what about in the commercial side? And we have our special guest, Marcelo Bermuda, who is Apex Capital. We're going to talk about syndication, how to invest, and some of the returns he has seen for some of his commercial projects. Now, we as a community, maybe can duplicate that. So tune in next week, Thursday at 11 o'clock. Crystal?
All righty, so thank you guys. As if Robin Billups was here, she'd tell you to go to the 3 dots in the chat room, save the chat so that you can go through. There's some great information. Let's make sure we support Michael Anderson. Go buy his book at Amazon. There's a link in the chat room as well. With that, thank you, Michael Banner, for your input. Thank you, Michael Browning, and everyone that tunes in every week, and Emma Maxey. And we will see you next Thursday at 11 a.m. For another inspirational and incredible session with our stakeholders and leaders that are doing things in our community to make a change. So you guys have a fantastic week. Remember, September 14th, if you haven't voted already by mail, then make sure you get to the polls. We want no on the recall. We do not want to be a Republican state. I am so sorry if anybody's here a Republican, but we do not want to be a Republican state. And women on the call, we need to voice our concerns about what's going on in Texas, because that same thing can happen here. It's not about what we think it's about political moves. So we need to make sure that someone is not telling us from a political platform, from a totalitarian platform, what we can do and how we should live our lives. So we have to protect our women. We have to stand up for women and make sure that their voices are heard. So you guys have a great weekend. Be safe, and we will see you next Thursday. And you can find this link on YouTube under the Business Zone with Crystal and Gilbert. You can also find it on the Community Briefing website in a few days, and you can find all our other speakers videos there as well. So guys, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.